Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BC XR Lab podcast. My name is Jon Thaler. I'll be one of the hosts for today, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Bruce Wolcott, and I teach here at Bellevue College, work at the XR Lab, and I'm part of the Northwest XR EDU network, which is what this interview will be in support of for people a few weeks ago who missed Jen Elbek uh, from University of Idaho. Jen, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Dr. Jen Elbek, and as Bruce said, I am an instructional designer at the University of Idaho.
Well, today we want to first of all, thank you for coming to the last general meeting of the Northwest XR EDU network to talk about your escape room that you did in a program called SeekBeak. So I'm wondering if you could further clarify what your professional background is and your current role that you described as an instructional designer at University of Idaho.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in teaching English as a second language. That was what I did as my master's degree, graduated from Gonzaga University, and that led into my PhD, which I pursued at Washington State University. And that PhD is in language literacy and technology. Originally, I went into it thinking I was going to be teaching, furthering my language teaching skills, and then I just fell in love with technology, and so, educational technology and teaching, and so I decided to become an instructional designer, and that's what I'm doing now at the University of Idaho. And I like to say, my job is helping faculty teach better, essentially.
Well, we came across your name. There was one person from Portland Community College who mentioned that you had worked out an escape room using a program called SeekBeak. And could you describe for us the SeekBeak escape room experience, what that was all about, and maybe a little bit more information about SeekBeak and why you chose that particular program?
Sure. And I'm going to go back a little ways. When I was doing my PhD at WSU, I had decided to do my research project on running an escape room for the purpose of looking at how I could teach a specific topic, and the specific topic was phonemic awareness to pre-service teachers, so students who were going into a teaching program, right? And originally, it was supposed to be a live escape room. In fact, this escape room had been built on campus, a physical room, and it had been nicely set up and it was all ready to go. And then the pandemic hit. And so then I had to figure out a way to continue to do my research by putting this online. And so, otherwise, I would have had to scrap the whole thing. And so I started looking around for different platforms, different options that I could do or to use to facilitate this escape room. And then I came across SeekBeak and started to play around with it and realized it had all the affordances that I really wanted in this type of a program, right? It had everything that I needed to build into it to create this sort of immersive, interactive, digital environment to explore the use of doing an escape room to teach phonemic awareness to pre-service teachers over Zoom. And that was the big thing, is could I use it over Zoom? Because it had to be ran live, because I had to be able to supervise the students and make sure that they were doing everything okay. And that's really, you could probably do it asynchronously, but that's, for me, that wasn't the point. The point was, wanted to be able to facilitate it, wanted to be able to interact with students, wanted to be able to collect data live, right? And so um, that's what ended up happening. So I built it out, and the project is supposed to be a design-based research project. So that means it takes place over multiple iterations. So the very first iteration was kind of like the little pilot study, I guess. And it was, it was interesting because what it ended up being in the end was totally different from the way it was in the beginning after all these different iterations. And you'll have to forgive me because it's been a while since I've looked at the data because this took place, 2020, 2021. And after I graduated, I've been focusing on my career since then, which haven't really returned to it since. But if I remember correctly, I believe it was across 5 iterations, and the final one was kind of like the polished version by the end, and ended up being the most effective, most engaging version of the escape room. And from that, was able to make recommendations for how to build it in the future.
Just a quick point of clarification
Sure.
here. You said it was the teaching process, the subject was phonemic awareness. Could you
Yes.
just briefly explain what that's about?
Yes, definitely. So phonemic awareness is it will first you should know that phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in the English, or in the English language. So um, and or I believe it's in any language, but certainly in the English language, um, it's the smallest unit of sound, and it can be a singular letter, it can be a combo of letters, but it's just one sound. And the idea is that when you teach students how to identify these sounds without seeing anything, they should just be able to hear it and say it back. It actually helps to prepare them better to be able to learn how to read in the future. And there's data on this. There's plenty of studies on this. So it's connected to phonics. Eventually, they learn to connect those sounds with the graphemes, which are the written versions of phonemes, right? And so, but the idea is they need to be able to approach the content in a way that kind of forces them to, I say force in quotations, um, forces them to say it aloud and think about saying it so that they're hearing it, because the written version can often throw them off, right? Because the actual sounds written on paper, what we perceive as that sound written on paper, might be different from actually how we say it, if that makes sense. So that's what we were trying to teach students. We are trying to get them to hear the sounds and recognize how this connects to phonics, and how this, of course, then helps their students, because eventually they'll be teaching, students how to read. And, you know, the benefit of using phonemic awareness in their classes to help their students learn how to read.
That's absolutely wonderful. Um, Earlier, we mentioned that you made this in SeekBeak.
Yes.
Could you describe SeekBeak? I know we'll get a chance to see it later, but for those that might not have seen it before or are fully aware of what SeekBeak is, how would you describe it as a teaching tool or in general?
Um, I would say so when I was looking around, I was looking at different platforms, like I said, and I came across a lot of different platforms that were used for example, tours for real estate. That seemed to be like the big thing that's out there. And some of them were okay, and I don't remember what the other ones were, but for the case of SeekBeak, it was more than just for real estate. It gave examples of doing tours of, you know, interesting places beyond just someone's house, right? And it allowed for embedding of hotspots, which is something I really wanted, because in an escape room you need to be able to explore the things in there, the different features. So the idea is that so the way that SeekBeak works, it's a 360 environment, 360-degree environment. So you're kind of like situated in the middle, and you can rotate the room around you 600 or 360 degrees, excuse me. And so, students get to be able to do that, and participants get to be able to do that, and then they can click around and click on different features in the image. They can open, whatever they're clicking on, and there are multiple different features. Like you can open images. There were embeds for videos. There were embeds for what I ended up using was a tool that was called learningapps.org, which is where it's just basically they're like games, but not really games. They're like activities, I guess, more. I think that describes it better. They're learning activities that you can build yourself. And I ended up embedding, after building these activities, embedding them into SeekBeak as the puzzles that would become what the students solve to solve the room, right? And so I embedded those in there. I embedded different images that kind of served as red herrings. So if students clicked down on something and it wasn't the right thing, an image would pop up and they'd be able to take a closer look at that image of whatever that thing was in the room, but then they'd realize, oh, well, this isn't what I'm looking for. So um, to go back a little bit, the idea was that there were 4 puzzles, which were based in the learningapps.org activities that I created, and 4 locks. And these were also, I also built these in the learningapps.org program. And so they would look around, they'd click around, and they would be able to, eventually come across a puzzle, and they'd have to solve that puzzle to get the code at the end. And then they'd have to try and find that corresponding lock. So there were 4 different codes, and there was a numeric code, a alphabetical code. There was like a mixed one, and then there was like one that was a full word. And if they solved the puzzle that was for the numeric code, but then they went and the next lock that they found was, say, for the word. Okay, well, that's not going to fit in there. They have to keep looking then for the rest of the items in the room. So that worked really well with SeekBeak. And the reason why, part of the reason why it worked really well, I realized, is because with the hotspots where I embedded things, I could make those hotspots invisible so that it wasn't too easy for students. Because if there was like this blaring icon that's like, oh, there's
Click
something
me.
here, you can definitely, yeah, exactly. It would be too easy for them, and they could just like go right there and find it. But they had to actually search the room, right? And they had to click around, and they work together in teams to help each other, to find these things. So there'd be like a student saying, oh, there'd be, well, the way that it worked was, especially over Zoom, only one student can go at a time as far as like actually being the one to navigate and control the room. And the way I did that was that when I had students go into the room, and there were like 3 to 4 students per group, right? There wasn't, that ended up being the best number, because if there are too many, it gets too complicated and convoluted and all that. But so there were 3 to 4 students at a time, and it would go one person at a time, and each person would get 5 minutes per person to navigate the room and control it. And then they would, that person's 5 minutes would be up, and then it would be the next person's turn. And then when you get to the last person, then you just rotate back around again until either the time runs out or they solve the room. So then they're taking turns, but while the person who's navigating is doing their part, the other students are like helping to guide them, which was really cool to see. The other students are like, oh, click on that, or try this, or okay, now we're working on a puzzle. Let's work on the answer together. So they would work together to solve that puzzle. So it was very collaborative, very interactive. It wasn't just like, oh, this one person's going, everybody's quiet. Like that almost never happened. So it was cool to see them like working together to solve the room.
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question. That was a lot. Yeah.
So Jen, you have
Yeah.
some visuals of your SeekBeak
I do.
escape room. Could you share those with us and
Yes.
talk about what we're looking at?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me go there now, and I will share my screen.
Thank you, Jen, for being willing to share your screen like this. Please walk us through, what are we seeing here?
Sure. And actually, before I go into this, I wanted to quickly show kind of what I use to guide myself through the study and through the facilitation of the room. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so y'all can see this better. So this is just a Google Doc where I organized everything. And so these are notes to myself to remember to do before, running the room. This is my kind of my setup. And then so I had the actual study room, which I'm going to show you in just a second. Then I had a practice room, because while doing this study, I found that students needed to be able to practice the navigation of the room and the controls of the technology before actually playing, because many of them didn't know, it wasn't readily available to them as far as like being intuitive, right? So having them play around each with the controls before going into the room really helped um, to lessen the interference or the obstacles of that technology and allow them to just focus on solving the room rather than having that technology be an obstacle, like I said. So that's one of the recommendations I make for this is allow them to practice it before they actually play for reals. Um, so then I had them do a survey. That's how I collected um, the data. It was like a pre and post quiz that tested their phonemic awareness knowledge before and after. Then I went over the rules, and then I showed them how to use the controls and let them play with the controls. And then an important thing about an escape room is to have a story or a narrative. And so I went ahead and kind of narrated what this room was about. And the idea was that students were locked in this room by accident during a snowstorm, and they had to escape the room before the time would run out because by the time the time runs out it would have snowed in and they wouldn't have been able to get home until morning and they would have had to stay the night in the room. And then I created something called a Voki that where I had this avatar that looks like a student and they would further explain like what the room was about and that it was about phonemic awareness. It was created like by that student's mom and that they had to solve the room to get out in 45 minutes. Otherwise, they'd be stuck there. All right. So I also assigned students roles so they felt like they had, purpose as they're solving the room. This is one of the recommendations that I made, from my research is that each student has a specific role. Like someone was the note taker who would pay attention to things as they were going and take notes. One would keep track of the 5-minute timer that would tell them when to switch turns. There was an explorer and we would use these different ones each time and like the explorer would be the one to go first. They're like the intrepid person that goes first. And then this one kept time. The watchman kept track of the overall time of the room, the 45 minutes, so that they could remind people to stay on track, so that they wouldn't run out of time. And so everybody had a purpose in the room, which really helped, I think, motivate them to participate in it. And then there was, of course, the post quiz, and then I had debriefing questions that I asked them. And so I interviewed them at the end of the whole thing and collected data on that. And then there was a post survey, of course, that came later. And then these are embed links to the countdown timer. So I just wanted to share this. This is another recommendation I make is to make yourself a script and have a narrative. Of course, the narrative is always recommended. That's not my recommendation. That's based on research, previous research from escape room studies. But I recommend having a script for yourself so you know exactly what you're going to do. So that was one of the recommendations that I make. Okay, so let's take a look at the room because I spent a lot of time on that. So this is what it looks like when you first go into it, and this little message pops up and it says that there are 4 locks and 4 puzzles, and you got to solve the puzzles and get the lock combos and then find the locks and use those combos to open the locks. I said sometimes pictures are just pictures, so because sometimes students would get caught up on a picture and be like, oh, maybe this is a hint or a clue, and that's not always the case. So make sure to read all directions thoroughly. Students do not do that. They do not read the directions. So I had to find ways to make it more engaging by using video shorts rather than written directions because they will not read the directions. They will skip over them. That was another recommendation that I made is don't use written directions. Use a video because, I mean, technically they could skip a video, but they don't, luckily. So, and if they wanted a hint from me at any time, they could ask for 3 hints at any time and I would give that to them. So, and because I'm, there watching and observing. So here's the countdown timer. It's already started because I started it before, but it'll count down to 45 minutes or from 45 minutes to 0. This is the way they escape is through this door here. They have to enter the correct final code after getting all the other codes from all the locks that they open and then combine that to make the final code, which opens the door.
This is that
So
embedded widget that you were talking about, where
with
you
that,
so that's what the embedded widget looks like when they click to interact with the locks.
yes, and this is a different one than the learningapps.org. This one's called Flippity, and this is the scavenger hunt one. And this one I thought was it served a better purpose for the final lock,
Hmm.
because it had more affordances. Like when you open it, you can have a GIF appear, and it was like people celebrating, being like, "Yay, you opened the lock, or you escaped the room, congrats!" So I ended up doing that. Another thing I recommend is when you're scaffolding your activities, especially if it's a new subject for students, they've never, it could be reinforcement. For example, some of these students who took or did this escape room, they'd already taken phonemic awareness lessons in their class, and then this was like a reinforcement activity. But for some other students, they had never learned anything about phonemic awareness, and so I needed to scaffold it so that it wasn't so that it was sensical. So I started with the most basic lesson first, and that's this, and that's why I say read first. So they click on that and they learn kind of the basics of phonemic awareness. And then from there, as long as they did this first, they could then solve any puzzle in any order and it wouldn't matter. So let me pause that. So then this is the little video that kind of gives them that lesson. And let's say they watch this video, then it at the end it opens up this activity, start exercise, and in this one you have to match the words with the same end phoneme, so the same sound at the end. It says listen to the audio recording first. You do not have to match this with anything, so they're instructed to listen to the audio recording. That's the directions for the activity. Then they have to match the end sounds, and so in this case they would then say I decided to use pictures so that they'd have to say it out loud, rather than just read it, because when you read it, like I said, that whatever is written can be confusing. It can make you think that the sound is something else, so they had to say it out loud and listen to the sound to be able to match the endings. So nose and maze have the same end sound, so that's the same phoneme. Ring and tongue have the same end sound, so we'll put those together. Uh, let's see, cat and nest have the same end sound, that T sound. Ice and floss have the same end sound, ice, floss. Knife and laugh have the same end sound, and clock and attic have the same end sound. So that would be the answer. So then this is the code they would get, and this is the numeric code. So I go ahead and say, okay, 37146. So now I have to find the lock in the room that corresponds to that. And they're placed throughout in different areas. I think this was one, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so this is one, but I don't think this is the numeric one. Yeah, this says a lock requires a combo of numbers and letters to open it. So this isn't the right one, so they have to keep searching. And if I remember correctly, I think it's this one.
Jen, I have a quick question here.
Yeah.
I noticed that you had that image matching, phenome matching exercise. That was a separate program that was brought into SeekBeak, correct? That was
Yes.
that was embedded within SeekBeak, correct?
Yes, that was the learningapps.org. These activities, all these the locks and the puzzles are all through learningapps.org.
And this is something similar to that, right? You have an interactive screen where they have to put in a number in order to
Mm-hmm.
open it. Is that a feature of SeekBeak, or is that another program that you're using there that's embedded in SeekBeak?
This is learningapps.org. So there are different activity types that you can create in learningapps.org. Like in this case, I believe it's just for this one, it's a like put an answer in the blank, and then it gives you feedback whether you got it right or not. You can customize the feedback, and so in this case, if they got this answer right, that code, it says open. Now this lock is open. Your second number is 61, and so that second number is the second number for the final lock that goes to the door. So when they open all the locks, it tells them which order the numbers go into, put in the correct order to open the door.
Yeah.
Does that
So
make
they got to
sense?
do all the activities. You said
Yep.
other than the first lesson, they could do the puzzles in any order. And then when they
Correct.
have the answers, they bring the final answer to the final lock and are
Yep.
rewarded with a celebratory GIF. Is that
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yep.
The last question I have regarding your room here,
Mhm.
Jen, is how did you measure the success of your students? Did you get feedback forms, or did you get some way of getting feedback for the experience that students had within the SeekBeak environment?
Yes. So, as I showed before with in my script here, I had a pre and post kind of quiz that tested their, knowledge before and after, phonemic awareness knowledge before and after they entered the room. And then I had at the end also some debriefing questions asking them kind of their perspectives on participating in the room. And then I had a final survey that asked them to expand and rate their experience, in the room. So that's what this one is here. So that's how I collected that
So
information.
related to this, my question
Mhm.
is, you're an instructional designer. Are
Mhm.
you planning to continue using these kinds of spatial computing interactive experiences moving forward with the curriculum that you're developing?
I would love to. I think so. I found that this activity, and especially after speaking to students, they found this to be really engaging. I got a lot of feedback like, I learned more from this than I did in my class. I thought that this was really fun and I enjoyed it, but I also felt like I learned something. And their pre and post surveys, especially for students who had never learned any phonemic awareness, there was some statistical significance in the differences between the before and after quizzes that showed that they did learn something. And certainly, they did. They also rated their like confidence in their knowledge before and after, and there was a significant difference between that. Um, so where was I going with this?
And one last question I have:
Sorry.
what was the
Oh, go
age
ahead.
range? What was the age range for the students getting involved in this activity?
So these are pre-service teachers, and they're in that means they're in an undergraduate program. So they're technically adults, right? They're young adults. Um, I feel like I missed something. I left out something from the previous question that you asked me, but yeah. So I mean, this is a room. It can be formed for any age technically, and it has like the physical room. They actually ran with students. So this 360 image is of the real room that was on campus. So this is a real place on the WSU campus, and we went. I had a friend go in there over the pandemic and take this image. But kids have played this physical room. They haven't used my digital room yet, but you could probably design it for any age.
All right.
Okay, there anything else that you think we should know about this this experiment, really, that you did in spatial computing that came about as a result of the pandemic? It sounds like you had sort of a forced hand at the beginning, that you really needed to come up with an alternative to students being in a physical space, right? Actual physical space. And this was really a creative solution to that, correct?
Yes, and I now I remember what we were talking about before. You were asking me as an instructional designer if I would continue to use something like this. I think this is a great activity. uh, I do think it's super engaging, and students seem to love it. They seem to learn well from it. I guess one of the problems is that it takes a lot of work to put together. This took hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to put together. So I would say I would love to see faculty do more activities like this, but I think time, especially because they're already under a lot of pressure, to teach effectively in other ways, and many of them aren't doing that. This is a big ask to ask them to facilitate an activity like this, especially because it does take a long time. So, if there were a way to make this sort of thing really easy for them, then I would recommend it. The problem is most faculty don't even have time to apply many of the basic um, evidence-based teaching practices that I recommend in the center. Which is not to say like I wouldn't recommend this. If somebody already came to me and was like, "I have my class together. I have everything done that I could possibly think of to do. I'd like to kick it up a notch." Then I'd be like, "Well, have you considered an escape room?" So, but I don't know if we're there yet. A lot of faculty just struggle to get their
This is
classes together in general. You know what I mean?
So this is potentially like faculty are really busy.
Yes,
Potentially under faculty supervision, you could get students involved with building a project like this as like a
definitely.
hands-on learning experience.
Hmm.
Turn it into an assignment where the students make the escape rooms and then they run through each other's, and you're teaching and you're learning, and then the
Oh,
professors don't have to do
absolutely.
anything, right?
Yes, definitely. I could
Uh,
see that being a thing. And I think it also it depends on the class and
mhm.
what the ultimate objectives are, learning objectives for the course. Um, you know, I and I've learned from the start that technology for technology's sake isn't a good, way to teach. And so um if there was a specific purpose for having students build an escape room that aligns with the learning objectives, then absolutely 100%. Otherwise, if it doesn't augment the learning, if it doesn't support the learning, because the learning should come first, then I would
Mhm.
say, might consider, reconsider if
Mhm,
that makes
mhm.
sense.
So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is that this is a powerful teaching tool, but
Hmm.
the uh, ease of access for someone maybe just getting started with it is
Yeah.
a bit more time consuming than maybe everybody has the leeway to really dive into.
Correct. Yes. And which is not to say that, and actually, this is something I fully support and I would like to see more of, is people reaching out and getting their instructional designers to create things like this for them, because you know we should be able to do that, and someone should be able to say, "Hey, I would like this built for my class. Can you help me? Can you help me put this together?" And a team of instructional designers could say, "Yeah, definitely, I could put this together for you and show you how to run it and run it with your students." That sort of collaboration where that subject matter expert, the faculty, and the instructional designer are working together to create these different learning experiences, but also the instructional designer taking some of that developmental burden off of that faculty person, so that they can incorporate more things like this. Then I think that that's a little bit more doable.
So, would you say
Mhm.
that the role of these kinds of XR technologies that you've explored
Mhm.
in the future of education is in a collaborative form between the instructional designers, the faculty, or maybe even student participation if it aligns with the learning goals and
Oh,
objectives?
absolutely. Yeah, and I want to see more collaborations like that. And at least at my institution, this is not to call out my institution because, we're doing our best, but I want more collaborations with different faculty and stakeholders across campus to create more enriching learning environments and opportunities like this, because this something like this, especially during the pandemic, was so engaging for students where they were burnt out before, right? Because they're all taking Zoom classes and all the Zoom classes are the same. It's, many people didn't learn how to, many instructors and faculty didn't learn how to teach online before being forced into an online environment, so they didn't know best practices. So they're basically just moving their lecture to Zoom, and it's not engaging. So an activity like this was really refreshing for students because they're like, wow, this is something different. I don't have to sit you know through that stage on the stage teacher centered classroom, right? It's more student centered, it's more interactive, it's more um, collaborative, right?
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming onto our podcast and sharing your experiences and some tips and tricks of using these kinds of programs like SeekBeak, and the demo I think is absolutely wonderful.
Also, Jen, I want to thank you on behalf of the Northwest XR EDU Network for joining our meeting and for contributing this great experience. That's the whole point of why we're here, is collaborative experiences and learning from each other as we explore this whole territory of spatial computing and XR and interactive spatial learning. So thanks a lot. It was great talking with you today, Jen. And appreciate your coming into our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And before we end, I always like to end with a thank you to everyone who came and watched this podcast, and a final goodbye as well.